You can see the correct slide, right? So we're live, Chris?
Yes, we are live.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's really an honor to me to kick off as the executive director of the DSSC, the first webinar of the season 2 for the DSSC. And this time we have, our common understanding. We start now our journey from the vision really to value. And today we have, well-renowned speakers here in the room that will discuss and present you the next chapter of the Data Space Support Center. And in the next hour, you will see the results of what we have altogether worked since October 2022 to lay the ground for the season 2 that's really focusing on impact. And I don't want to say too much before Boris will introduce the reasons for having the DC2 and also our basic principles. But giving a short overview of today, it's a pleasure then to have right after me Boris, who will introduce the DSC2, the second phase of the DSSC. And as I said, give the basic principles and our mission and who are we is also very important. Then the second part of today is Sonia Jimenez from IDSA telling you how we support you and the data spaces community to accelerate with the dedicated DSSC support. But this is not all. We also are here to, let's say, the growth of the data spaces ecosystem that Nuria Delama, Secretary General of BDVA, and her colleague Savas will tell you more about what is in for you if you know the Data Space Initiative. And last but definitely not least is Matthijs Punter from TNO, who will show how we can build on what we developed in the past and how we can create the success of the first season of the DSSC. That is very much needed for of course, also the success of the second phase. So saying that, please, Boris, take over the screen and guide us through your slides.
Yes, very good. Thank you, Tobias. So let me first share my screen. Entire screen. So now I would move to, it's always a little bit of a hustle here. Presentation. Right now. Now you should see my slides in full screen mode, right? Very good. So then we are good to go. Once more, also a good morning. Welcome from my side. As Tobias mentioned, also for me, it's a great pleasure and also an honor, I must say, to continue being the coordinator of the Data Spaces Support Center. And I would like to introduce, let's say, not only this session today, but also, let's say, what Tobias referred to as the season 2, with a couple of remarks, because I think it's useful, because as you all know, we have been on our way for quite some time. So what has changed and what kind of priorities do we try to set, right? The question is, well, why do data spaces matter right now? Of course, you know, that rests on 3 pillars. We already had a European data strategy since 2020, which also addresses, let's say, the need to team up, right? We have lots of data and we want to make use of it, but it's spread all over the place, distributed to different stakeholder groups. And what we need to do is activate this data, finding a balance between, well, the different interests of the various stakeholders. Now, this strategy has been further developed into the European Data Union strategy, which basically emphasizes this need to make better use of the data. And of course, as you all know, there is, let's say, the development around artificial intelligence with a lot of, let's say, innovation potential, but also potential for competitiveness and societal prosperity. And again, we need to make sure that we well, make best use of the raw material for AI, which is data. But again, not, let's say, in an uncontrolled fashion, but through trusted frameworks and according to governance schemes that find a fair balance, right? I also mentioned the fact that in Europe, we, well, have to live. This sounds a bit more negative than it's supposed to be, but are confronted with, let's say, with the fact that, well, our resources are split and distributed across various stakeholder groups. And also that is something that we can observe, let's say, in the implementation of the European data strategy, because we have fragmented ecosystems, let's say, both within these ecosystems, so lots of, let's say, different players, no natural centers of gravity. But then also, of course, in their entirety or in their collaboration, we have, let's say, a fragmented landscape of different ecosystems, and they need to, interact, collaborate, because only then we can maximize the use of the data. And that is something that basically all of these three things drive a little bit, let's say, our mission. So Tobias briefly mentioned also the fact that we have gone already a good part of our way. And that is something that you can see here on the left-hand side. So we will build, let's say, on the success of the past. In particular, and that is something I'd like to stress, literally out of nothing, I would say, on a blank sheet of paper. I mean, there were, let's say, predecessor projects like OpenDay and others. And let's say also we have started data space work 10 years ago, but more or less on a European level, that was, let's say, a blank sheet of paper when we started. I believe it was in 2021. So we had to find consensus about, let's say, what really is a data space and what kind of building blocks a data space consists of. And that is why we introduced the blueprint, not, let's say, as a DSSC, but let's say with a DSSC being the orchestrator, the mediator, the facilitator of this broad community of collaborators. And that is available. In my personal point of view, it's probably also the most comprehensive account of data space knowledge. This can be used, it's there. Technology is there, standardization is there, which also was not the case when we started. So now we move to the green right-hand side, where we need to make use of that, right? So we need to implement all of the things that we have jointly developed in order to live up to the mission and the idea of the European data strategy, to actually use data for the better of our societies and economies, right? And that is also why we want to get closer, let's say, to the actual projects, the data space initiative, the European data spaces, as it has been in the past, where we were once more concerned with, let's say, creating this blueprint. And of course, we also want to make sure that really we provide hands-on acceleration and use case deployment. Right. So that basically then translates into a mission that you can see here. I don't want to go through all the details. I already mentioned the upper left-hand side that we want to, and will, by the way, because we already started that, support individual data space initiatives. We had, like, when was it, 6 weeks or so, or 4 weeks ago in Bilbao, the kickoff of the so-called sector orchestrators, which are the ones that translate, on the one hand side, the knowledge into the field, but even more importantly, that listens to what's going on in the field where we have to respond to, so where we need to help. So that's a bidirectional process. Then also on the left, so of course we will, let's say, leverage everything what we've done. So it's a huge investment of all of us, not necessarily only in money, but in particular in time and intellectual capacity. And we want to make sure that this basically gets implemented so that we now enter a return on investment phase. Surely we see ourselves still as, let's say, the coordinator, let's say, of a platform of knowledge exchange and exchange of good ideas. So with a mandate by the European Commission, we will take this activity very, very serious in order to make sure that we drive the community forward. And then on the lower right-hand side, what we also want to do is create and maintain an overview, not only about, let's say, the data space initiative landscape in a narrow sense, but also making sure that this connects to, let's say, more recent developments around AI, for example, the AI gigafactories that, as I hear, about to come then next year. So we also want to make sure that data spaces function as a tool set to make data available for the training, fine-tuning, and use of AI according to trustworthiness or requirements of trustworthiness and data sovereignty. Once more, so to remind all of you, in case you don't know it, so what is actually the Data Space Support Center? Right now, we are a project. And you can see here, let's say, the 4 main pillars on the right-hand side. I mentioned many of them. So we are a project funded by the European Commission. The project duration is for 3 years. And also what we want to do in addition to what you see on the right-hand side is making sure that everything that we do sustains after April 30th, 2029, because then we believe that it should be in a self-sustained way, but this is something that we want to make sure helping. Yes, and perhaps then last information from my end, we extended the consortium a little bit. I already mentioned the sector orchestrators, so they are now official part of the group of beneficiaries. You can see on the right-hand side, because we felt, well, our key mission is to be close to the users, and therefore also we need to reflect that in the composition of our consortium. Also, we are very happy to continue to work with associated partners. You can see here a couple of, let's say, leading edge data space initiatives, and I'm personally very happy to have them on board because they exactly tell us what they need. And I also encourage them to really, really be pushy on that. Talking about being pushy, that is also my expectation from, let's say, the community. Tell us what you need. We are ready to help you. We are committed to our mission, and we are committed to make data spaces an integral part of the European Data Union strategy. Thank you very much for the moment.
Thank you, Boris, for greatly outlining where we come from, where we go to all together, and who will do it. And now, Sonia, please, the floor is yours to show us how we will do it.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. Yeah, I guess it's working. Okay, perfect. So hi everyone, Sonia Jimenez from IDSA. I'm gonna explain to you one of the main pillars of this DSSC. Boris mentioned already, well, part of our mission is to support the initiatives, the data spaces in becoming sustainable. So to scale up to the point that they become viable. And so we're focusing this time on this part of the mission, and we are assigning a lot of efforts and resources to this. And this is the part of the project that we call accelerating and supporting the common European data spaces. So I will explain to you how we envision this and how we plan to achieve this goal. Here's an overview of what the DSSC provides. I will show this as a teaser because my colleagues will be explaining most of the content of this slide here. So you know about the blueprint and toolkits, all the building blocks, the data and AI observatory, of course, the very well-known symposium and awards. As I say, we will show you all this. I want to focus on this yellow cage, the acceleration and coaching, and how we plan to provide this hands-on, more tailored support to data spaces initiatives. At the end, to put it very easy, maybe a bit blunt, our goal is to increase the maturity of data spaces. So it's about becoming sustainable. It's about living beyond the project phase. It's about being viable. So in order to achieve this, we need to increase the maturity and to plan how to move, let's say, from A to B together with them. So this is how we're going to do it. So we're introducing these new roles that would provide different types of support to the initiatives. Starting from the left-hand side, we have the sector orchestrators that Boris already mentioned. You can see the sector orchestrators as the experts in the different sectors and the main point of contact for the initiatives in those sectors in the DSSC. So they provide sector-specific guidance and support. I think it's very important to mention that these sector orchestrators come from the different sectors, so they know the initiatives, they work in the initiatives in those sectors. They have all the contacts, so they're very knowledgeable. They're experts really in the sectors. So they will be able to share best practices and capture the community needs, and they will foster the engagement through events, coaching, and showcases. So we have now this group of 14 sector orchestrators. They also come together on a regular basis to share best practices so that one sector doesn't have to reinvent the wheel if another is already working on something. So they can get to leverage lessons learned and best practices from each other. So the second role that we introduce is the value coach. So you can see the value coaches as dedicated consultants, and they provide this tailored one-to-one support to the data spaces. This support can cover any area from business, governance, operational, and the technical challenges. And they offer this type of targeted coaching strategic guidance. Then on the right-hand side, we see the ecosystem accelerator. Whenever we see that several initiatives are facing the same type of challenges, we will create these projects, these accelerator projects, time-limited sprints that address a specific challenge that applies to several initiatives. This means we will work in a team together with the initiatives and the experts from the DSSC to close this gap, so to say, to address this specific challenge. Everything we do, we will document, because everything we do has to be reusable. It has to be accessible for the community. And we will showcase also the successful use cases. And the result of this will be that the initiatives will be able to apply for the Data Spaces Awards. So how does this look like? So all the steps, how we envision or how we plan to provide support. We've defined this in this funnel. First, it starts with learning about the DSSC and what we do. So that's why we're having this webinar now. That's why we will have more webinars, more events. That's also the role of the sector orchestrators in their specific sectors. Of course, we'll have our websites and the wider community. So the data spaces say, okay, I'm facing this challenge. I would like to solve this problem. I need support here. So they reach out to us. They submit a request. We at the DSSC evaluate this request. So for this, we have a tool, the maturity assessment, that I will go into more detail in a minute. We have the maturity assessment, and we have some criteria that we have defined. And with these results, we will see if you're eligible for the more tailor-oriented support, or if you're maybe in your case, you need other type of support. It may be guiding you through to the specific or suitable documentation, or joining another session, online session. So for this, we'll hand over to the community that colleagues from BDVA will present. But in the first case, we say, yes, you need this tailor-oriented support. A value coach would then reach out to you and have a conversation with you where you explain your challenge in more detail, and you both can align on the expectations and the goals you have. And here, also two things can happen. Either you get the support from a value coach for your specific case, or we realize that several initiatives are facing the same challenges. And for this, we would create this accelerator project. Again, several initiatives, experts from the DSSC, they work together on a specific challenge to reach a specific goal. all what we produce along this process, everything will be documented so that it can be shared with other initiatives, with the community. We will disseminate the results. Of course, we have the several tools. We have the showcases. So we will give you visibility. And afterwards, so that's not the end yet, because we have to be able to measure the impact that we had working together in this accelerator project and in this value coaching. So we will measure again where you stand in terms of maturity in the different layers. So now the maturity assessment that I've mentioned several times, this is one of our key tools that we're going to be using. You can see this as the entry point for the DSSC support and acceleration. It answers the question, where do you stand today? So this started in the DSSC 1, was handed over to Sensenelec. Now it's a technical specification from Sensenelec that was recently published, so July 1st, and can be accessed now. It evaluates the data spaces across 6 dimensions, which are governance, business, legal, interoperability, control over data and trust, and value creation. And based on this assessment and based on also the criteria we've defined, we will be able to assess which type of support you require. We're going to make this assessment, maturity assessment, available. So it can be an online tool, automated process. And also very important, so I said this is entry point for any type of support that we're going to provide to you, because first we need to know where you stand. We need to assess in which areas you need support and what's result we want to see at the end of this support that we will provide to you. And we want to be able to measure this, so we will use a maturity assessment for this purpose. But of course, the maturity assessment is going to be available for any data space that wants to check where they stand, that wants to see in which areas they need to improve, they need to work on, or that also wants to compare their initiative to others. So you don't have to wait until you say I need support from the DSSC to take the maturity assessment. You can take it anytime to assess where you stand. Okay, so and what happens at the end when we've done all the work, when we provide support, we work together to achieve those goals, then you can get recognized either through the showcases or applying for the Data Spaces Awards. So you assess your initiative, you get in touch with us, we support you, we help you achieve your goals. We measure that we were successful, and we disseminate the results. So we promote also your use case through the showcases, and you get to apply for the European Data Spaces Awards. And why? Because then you will get a lot of visibility. Bear in mind, the last symposium we had around 1,000 attendees that were able to see all the initiatives that applied for the awards. So yeah, this would be a way of getting some kind of visibility and some recognition for the work you've done and for the path also you went through. And my colleagues from BDBA will talk more about the awards and the symposium. And to summarize your journey with the DSSC, so first you would check where you stand by using the maturity assessment, and then you define your challenge and you reach out to us. We provide you the most suitable support for your use case. At the end, we have a successful story to disseminate and to show the others, so you get recognition. Then you apply for the awards, and we celebrate together in the symposium, where you find out if you're one of the lucky winners of the award ceremony. And this would be it from my side. I hand over back to you, Tobias.
Yeah, thank you, Sonja, for demonstrating the great support that we can offer to all the space initiatives. And now Nuria and Savas will show us also how to grow the data space ecosystem beyond what we have achieved in the past.
Thank you very much, Tobias. I will share my screen and you tell me when it works. Can you see it? Can you see the presentation?
Yes, it's not
okay, perfect.
full screen.
Thank you very much. So this presentation will be shared between myself and my colleague Savas. My name is Nuria de Lama. I'm Secretary General of the Big Data Value Association, BDVA, one of the partners in the Data Space Support Center. And basically, we will talk about how to serve the wider community of data spaces in Europe and beyond. I would say it's not only serving the wider community, but how to collaborate and how to engage with other entities that may be related to the operation of data spaces, as this is really needed for the success of the deployment and use of data spaces. So let's see the way we will engage the wider community. I will basically step into the motivation for these activities in the context of the project, and then my colleague Savas will provide more updates about how this will be materialized in the project and the way the path will happen. Basically, the main idea is that data spaces do not work in isolation. Sharing data is just a part of the story. In most cases, you need to access data because you want to combine that with your own data, or maybe you want to produce synthetic data for a specific system. So sharing data is a part of an overall ecosystem. And that's why I say that probably now that we have been able to mature data spaces, we need to focus more on a system perspective. So basically, data spaces will not succeed as standalone infrastructures, and the value of all these data spaces will depend on how well they connect to the broader ecosystem of digital infrastructures. If you have a look at my slide, on the right side, you will see a kind of summarized technology stack that includes the data collection and data generation through sensors, IoT, or other enterprise systems, the connectivity layer, which is very, very important, then the computing infrastructure like cloud, edge, AI factories, HPC. In the future, it may be quantum, data spaces that provide a trusted environment for sharing data. But then there is the part that has to do with how you use the data in order to generate value. And this relates, for example, to different kind of applications and systems, digital twins, analytics, or AI that was mentioned by Boris in the very beginning of the presentation. So basically, if we really want data spaces to be deployed in an operational environment of a company or any other organization, they really need to talk and connect to the different layers in the technical stack. So these relationships will be technical for sure, and in most cases also of organizational nature. And basically, the reality of the data spaces, also from a business point of view, and the digital transformation they will enable, will only happen if there is the right orchestration of interoperable ecosystem. That's why this relationship with the other layers of the stack need to happen. And I have included here a couple of examples that are very easy to understand. The first one has to do with how to fuel AI, how to create and train models. And for this, data is a must. So you may know that the European Commission has invested a lot of money on the so-called European AI factories. These are computational infrastructures that combine different kind of computing resources like Euro HPC supercomputers, GPUs, AI software stacks, and the environments for model development. Others may come in the future. And in fact, at this very moment, the connection between data spaces and European AI factories is not obvious. That's why the Commission has also worked on something called data labs that will basically prepare the data to be injected from the data spaces to the AI factories. So this may happen in many different ways, but what it is clear is that the data spaces will be a critical source of data for AI factories, and that this connection needs to be established from a technical and organizational point of view, as I mentioned in the very beginning. So the relationship is very relevant because basically data spaces will enable trustworthy data sharing to address the current problems we are going through, like data fragmentation, lack of quality, or the regulatory compliance that is needed in order to fuel AI systems. So this relationship will really be crucial. And in fact, we have planned already relationship with quite a lot of entities. You see some of them mentioned there as part of the AI Continent Plan, where you already see the relationship between data, computing infrastructure, or the development of algorithms, including also the regulatory environment. Another example that is very obvious why this collaboration is needed and why we will be working on this heavily in the second part of this project is the computing continuum between cloud, edge, and data. And one of the reasons why this needs to be addressed in a proper way is because a lot of data will never go to centralized cloud environments. A lot of them are generated locally in, for example, hospitals, factories, vehicles, power plants, as I've included there in the slide as just some samples. And basically, we really need to connect this physical infrastructure and the computing on cloud and edge with the data spaces to ensure that everything happens smoothly. Without edge computing, basically, many of the industrial data spaces we are talking about now would not be possible because there may be a lot of issues and limitations, like, for example, bandwidth or latency that may be needed in some applications. So basically, we want to address all these problems that happen in real life when you are using data spaces in a more operational environment. And the idea is that even though the core of gravity of the project is the data space initiatives, as already mentioned by my colleague Sonia, we think that we really need to work hand in hand with all the other initiatives that will provide different pieces of this technology stack that I have mentioned before. And this includes, for example, as I mentioned, AI initiatives, the cloud to edge initiatives, but also SDOs, policymakers, other research communities that are providing technology for data spaces, digital innovation hubs, and I saw some references to that in the chat before, or the simple infrastructure. So in the case of BDVA, we will focus mainly on this wider ecosystem so that we ensure that data spaces are really fulfilling the requirements of organizations, not only the data sharing part, but also how they connect to the different systems that make sense in a real technological deployment environment. And then some aspects that will be covered in the project, and then my colleague Savas will tell you the way we will do it, is basically offering an entry point for the ecosystem, so ensuring that we have the mechanisms to engage with these initiatives that I've mentioned before, then raising awareness and working together on the development of the Data Space Support Center, but also the different data spaces initiatives, so including the common European data spaces. So ensuring that these developments are happening in connection with the other initiatives, and not everything is done and then we give the package to other communities, because then they will never be accepted in a real world. Influencing and aligning the strategic international ecosystems and avoiding effort fragmentation. This is really key to ensure that this is cost efficient. Bringing insights that support the asset curation that was already offered in the first part of the Data Space Support Center, and of course, offering in general support for the implementation of the data union. And finally, all this should help us to foster the adoption efforts that the project is really intended to do. And with this, I stop a bit about the motivation of why this relationship and engagement with the wider community is needed in the context of the project. And my colleague Savas will go further in detail on the things that we will be doing in the project and the mechanisms that we will set up in order to do so. So Savas, the floor is yours. Tell us a bit how this changes in this new project.
Thank you very much, Nuria. For those that you were familiar with also with the former DSSC project, we are aiming to somehow to go from community awareness building, if I can say, in this stage, to more to focus more on activities that activate the community and scale adoption. This has been already mentioned. We are aiming, of course, as Tobias said, to grow the community so that the DSSC and the European data spaces are much more visible all in all. But also to put more emphasis on adoption-oriented engagement through targeted communication and targeted engagement activity that also have as an ambition to support also the asset curation. We are aiming to use new tools and to foster also new and updated community collaboration approaches, so that the engagement, the collaboration between the DSSC, the European data spaces, and the broader digital and wider ecosystem will be facilitated. But of course, we want to build on top of successful activities from the former project, including the Data Spaces Symposium that is to be continued, of course, and the European Data Space Awards. Nuria, if you could proceed. This has been presented already, this kind of mapping exercise already presented by Nuria before, but what I would like to mention here through these bubbles is that we initiated also some stakeholder mapping activity already in the DSSC, and here please consider this as a work in progress. So if there are initiatives and stakeholders that you do not see being referenced, please let us know. But the goal of this slide is pretty much to inform and present to you that, again, we are aiming to really engage with a wide set of stakeholders in the broader ecosystem in order for us to foster alignment, to avoid fragmentation, as Nuria said, about investments in Europe in different fronts, and ultimately to support adoption-related activities, because at the end of the day, certain of these stakeholders in the wider digital ecosystem are to be considered as potential facilitators of adoption for the data spaces. So this is an important message that I would like to pass. Nuria, if you could proceed to the next slide. Thanks. So how you can engage with the Data Space Support Center. And now I'm presenting how we are moving beyond the engagement with the European data spaces that has been already presented by Sonia. So this is, again, more connected to the wider ecosystem. Of course, we aim to continue with activities being orchestrated by the Data Spaces Support Center. This would encompass bilateral engagement activities in the form of introductory meetings, workshops, deep dives that could support priorities of the DSSC and of the community. We are aiming, of course, also to continue some of the activities of the former project in a more lightweight manner, like the strategic stakeholder forum, but also to continue some thematic exchanges. And a new addition, if I may, is this Open Technology Suppliers Forum that aims to concentrate on the community of technology suppliers for the data spaces, and it's something that has been added to this next stage of the Data Space Support Center to facilitate discussions on this front. Beyond the activities orchestrated by the DSSC, we are aiming also to focus on activities that are orchestrated externally, outside the DSSC. Different communities, working groups, task forces. We are aiming to collaborate with them, to liaise with them in a certain way, so that we can even make DSSC and the European data spaces much more visible, that could build a collaborative model between activities being orchestrated by the DSSC and beyond, and increase ultimately the complementarity of activities and the inclusivity of different actors in the discussions. All in all these activities aim to support in enhancing the DSSC body of knowledge and vice versa. Nuria, if you can move on. Thanks. Beyond that, we will continue, of course, dissemination communication activities. We are preparing a fresh website that will be soon up and running. We will give continuity to our social media presence, and a new addition is a data spaces forum that we are building to be incorporated in this fresh website, that you will get more updates on how this will work very, very soon. So please stay tuned, because this is, I think, something quite exciting. With regards to events, the Data Spaces Symposium, of course, is to be continued. We had in the past very successful events, and there will be a new Data Spaces Symposium activity that is coming up in the first quarter of 2027. So again, stay tuned for more news with regards to the Data Spaces Symposium. That is an important flagship event for engaging and reaching out to the wider data space community and exchanging knowledge between all of us. And finally, from my hand side is I would like to also mention the European Data Space Awards, very well received by the community. We had in the first edition of the European Data Space Awards that were organized last year, more than 60 applications received. So this has been very well received by all of you. We aim to continue the European Data Space Awards. This will be celebrated within the Data Spaces Symposium. You see here that the winners and nominees for the two award categories that we organized last year, for excellence in end-user engagement and financial sustainability, and for the most innovative emerging data space. So the European Data Space Awards will be continued in collaboration, of course, with activities that Sonia mentioned before. So these are things that we are trying to orchestrate among ourselves and with the wider community. And you will soon have more information about how this will be operationalized in this second stage of the Data Space Support Center. And with this, I close my short presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Savas, Nuria. Thank you very much. So now the last speaker of today, Matthijs Pünter, will give us a deep dive into the knowledge engine room of the DSSC2.
All right, thank you so much. Hopefully you can hear and see me and also see the slides. Yes, so the blueprint was indeed one of the assets we already developed in the previous data space support center. We will continue doing that in the new data space support center. But there will be some changes. So, and Boris mentioned that already in his introduction, we did a lot in terms of creation, bringing together everything ranging from terms and definitions. There was no formal definition of a data space when we started the initial data space support center. We had lots of thoughts and ideas coming from all the various associations, and we succeeded in bringing this all together. What has happened in the meantime is that all of this has now also landed into standards and specifications and legislation. So there is now the Data Act, which has come into force. We expect the first formal standards to be published for that, for example, through Sensenelec. And that means that our focus can now shift a little bit from really creating things to curating things and really pointing data space initiatives to those formal specifications and best practices that are out there. And then we just have a few of them here on the slide. You can already find quite a few of them in the existing blueprint, but this will evolve over time. As an example, currently the trusted data transaction is under public consultation with Sensenelec. So the moment it becomes available, we will put it in the blueprint and guide data spaces towards that. Our mission, however, remains the same. We want data spaces with the blueprint to really take off and get to a higher flight level much more quickly, focusing on what really matters in the data space, the business model, the end user needs, the business case, so it becomes sustainable. Sustainable also in the way that it is future-proof. Some people talk about season 2 of data spaces, where we move from experimentation to implementation. And if you implement it on a large scale, then you really want to make sure your technology and your approaches are future-proof. And finally, also federations. So also really making sure that people can operate in multiple data spaces, that they work together in a much more seamless way. So our mission in that sense remained the same, but there are a few new ingredients that come to the table. AI, and particularly data labs, play a much more important role than they did, let's say, 4 years ago. We need to set up those data labs, and as a DSSC, we will liaison with them to really make sure that we use the common standards for all the data sharing approaches in the context of AI that are being developed there. The business models, they need to be sustainable, not only for the individual participants of the data space, but also for the data space as a whole, the data space governance authority, as well as the technology providers that provide the necessary tools and technologies for use in the data space. And that brings me, and I already saw it in the chat, also to the topic of digital sovereignty. We also should make sure that whatever we define here in terms of standards and specifications, that this infrastructure also becomes available. Of course, this can operate on a global scale, but also that we have a strong European foothold for that. So digital sovereignty and resilience is also an important new ingredient we put to our work here. But the focus will shift a little bit from creation to curation in terms of standards and specifications that is out there. Now, how will this be reflected in assets? And there will be a lot coming up, and we will inform you later on as we go along. But just to give you a sneak peek of what is going to be there. Indeed, there will be new versions of the blueprint. Those will be evolutions. We don't expect them to be revolutions as things are standardizing and converging and settling, but we will keep them up to date with the latest developments, both in terms of business and organizational building blocks, as well as the technical building blocks. The building blocks will provide the required capabilities for every data space, and you will also find them back in the maturity model and in the upcoming harmonized standards. They will provide you with specifications. That's mostly the case for the technical building blocks, and best practices, which is mostly the case for the business and organizational building blocks. And what will be there are the co-creation questions. So, of course, there is a common level for everyone, but then there are also specific topics, and the co-creation questions will help you to address those. And these are mostly the domain-specific elements in your data space. Now, what we expect to launch later this year, beginning of next year, is a cookbook. There is, of course, the booklet we developed late last year with version 3.0 of the blueprint. Many of you received a copy during the symposium, but we really want to evolve that into a cookbook, let's say Data Space for Dummies, really a point where you can start and learn about all the concepts that are in the blueprint. So that's upcoming. What we will also do is we're going to enhance what is already available, the so-called co-creation method. And the co-creation method is a sort of guide through the blueprint that helps you to take stock of all the building blocks, but also helps you to answer the co-creation questions. So really to make the design choices for your data space. And the co-creation method provides a methodology there. So there is a role play, there are workshops in there. It will be supported by templates and other tools. So really to help engage with your audience. And we expect also the value coaches and the experts that Sonja talked about before to use this as an important tool in their work. What is new, and we expect this to come later on, but I already want to give you a hint on that also, because I think in the community there are also ideas on this. So we're also open to those ideas. But what we recognized is that if you have to make design choices, then you also have to document them. In many of the new standards that are coming out, there is the notion of a data space rulebook, but until now there is not sort of a standardized template for data space rulebooks. There were various initiatives that went in that direction, but the standardized template is lacking. And we intend to create this with the community to make sure that data space rulebooks are machine readable, so you can automate a few things, particularly on the technical side, that they are human readable, that they are comparable, so we can also make more efficient links between data spaces, and also to link them to trust frameworks, which is also not always possible today. So this is a new topic that we intend to take up as part of the content curation we're intending. And then in parallel to all of this, we will continue to work with the DSSC toolbox. We will make, however, a slight more differentiation. Currently, you will find both technical tools as well as business and organizational tools in the toolbox. Business tools, you can think of the legal compass, a business model canvas, model contracts, and many more. But we will separate this a little bit from the more technical tools, where it's more about open source and software components that you can use to actually technically build data spaces. They have a slightly different nature. So probably we're going to differentiate a bit between the two. But we will update the toolbox, and we're also open to new submissions to the toolbox in due course. And it was actually mentioned many of the well-known open source initiatives, including Simple, will also be part of the technical toolbox. However, and this is one thing to close off, I want to highlight. Also on the technical side, we need to see a shift. So on the business side, and Sonja clearly mentioned this, we need value coaching. We need to, get to a higher maturity level for data spaces. The business models, the contracts, everything. But this also applies to the technology. It's nice to have open source building blocks, but then at the end of the day, you also need to have software companies and services companies that offer these. So we also intend to work a bit closer with them, especially if they are already working in the context of common European data spaces, to see what is needed to take those technical tools and really work on the whole integrated offering of those. And in particular, two categories are important. On one hand, it's, some could say the connectors, but the participant agent, so the software that every data space participant needs. And on the other hand, it's about the facilitating services, so the technical services that are needed to support the interplay of all the participants on the data space level. And this for us is also an area where things come together. So with the input from all the standardization bodies, we will have an updated DSSC blueprint providing you with specifications. That will serve as an input to an updated technical toolbox in terms of requirements, where the technical toolbox is likely to contain software libraries and software that you can use. Of course, for that, we need your input. So if you have open source or software libraries you want to put in there, please reach out to us. But then in this new spirit of season 2 of Data Spaces, we also intend to engage with suppliers of that technology that really can turn this into as-a-service offerings and really make sure that both for suppliers and users of the technology, this becomes an as-a-service market offering, so that the technology for Data Spaces also becomes a sourcing decision for data space initiatives. So a lot that will come. Hopefully, this gives a little bit of a sneak preview. And I think with that, I hand it back to Tobias.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you keep the slide, please? So there are many questions in the chat that I have seen, but I think many are already answered. So I will start answering to some that I've seen that were not answered, but maybe you can raise your hands. And then, yeah, we can have a few more questions maybe. So first, Damian, you have asked whether you, first, nice to see you here again. And we have seen that you asked about the CADA involvement of the DSSC. And I think we're not formally involved there, but we plan to engage with the AI factories and data labs, definitely. And the second question was about the best practices. And yes, indeed, we have a dedicated focus, as Boris also outlined in the beginning, that we will focus on how data spaces can create value. And in that sense, we are planning also to publish best practices. Jos Eickhout asked about definition of the sectors, and we follow here the definition of the European Strategy for Data that mentioned the 14 sectors, such as manufacturing and healthcare, and we align with that. There was a question by Mats about the data storage that we will not have a dedicated focus on. So we will not be deeper involved in that. Haluk, you asked whether we will offer support to non-EU data spaces, and I think we cannot offer hands-on support on that, but of course you're invited to first use the outcomes of the project that we will publish, and also you can definitely engage also with Savas and the other colleagues to get support that we can offer to non-European data spaces for sure. Xin Dong, you have asked whether we will collaborate with IDSA and ByData on developing training and certification program. We're not deeply involved here, but I saw a second ago that also Savas said, of course, IDSA is a partner and there's a natural connection, but it's not that deep, I would say. But of course, as everyone, also you can use the publications of the that we have. We will publish. Sorry. So this was in a nutshell what I think was not answered yet. Is there any further question? So no question.
Tobias, you have the easy ones of some people asking if the recording will be available for people, the recording of the webinar.
I cannot answer that. Maybe can somebody else answer that? Do we publish the presentations here? I think yes, but
yes, I will answer. So the recording will be stored, and then obviously we will try to find the proper place to make it available to the community. So certainly it will be available soon on the new website that will be popping, but you will be aware of that.
Yeah, one thing to the new website, we will publish it as of today. Unfortunately, it was not published before, but yeah, as there's not any question, I would really use the last minute to to make a call to action here. So I would be very happy if all of you can join the movement together with us to really make a sustainable impact from the data space ecosystem for both Europe, but of course also in the long term for the world, let's say, if it's not too big picture or too big goal. Yeah, please visit first the DSC LinkedIn. And as I said, today we will launch also the starting page of the new DSC website, where you can also get in touch with us directly. So everyone who's building a data space, you can get coaching tools and a tailored roadmap for your implementation. If you want to share your expertise with the community, also get input from the community, please directly reach out to us. Then you can become a part of the community that we can all together grow also the data space ecosystem. And also for those of you who are interested in new data policy, you can directly engage with our observatory and also the stakeholder forums that take care about these issues. Saying that, again, I want to thank all of you. First, the community that is present here, but also very much the speakers also of today for participating, joining, and presenting in today's meeting, the first webinar. This is definitely not the last one. We will keep you updated when we will come together in this or maybe a little bit bigger group also. Yeah, and saying that, I wish all of you a great rest of the day and a great start into the new week. Thank you so much for having you here.
Bye-bye, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.